What's up, BSers? Today, in honor of Blade Runner 2049 coming out, we decided to go back and revisit the original Blade Runner. Yes. Now, why are you making fun of me?
That was funny. So, disclaimer on this video, because people are very passionate about this movie, and we may not agree with all those people. So, keep in mind that we are not professional movie reviewers. We did not go to film school. We are not professional film critics. This is our own opinion on our own pure enjoyment of things. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think if you've seen any of our other movie reviews, you can kind of tell the style at which we like to review movies, and a lot of how we base, our rating of a movie is on just how much we enjoyed watching it. So keep that in mind as we go into this one, because spoilers, we didn't really like it.
So let's go ahead and kick off with our thoughts of the movie. So I am somewhat familiar with this movie. I actually hadn't watched it for the first time until less than a year ago.
Yeah, it was less than a year ago.
And so we rewatched it very recently because I was wondering if my negative opinion of it from my very first watch was just because I don't know, sometimes movie needs like 2 watches for you to like fully understand it and grasp it and whatever and enjoy it. No.
And I hadn't seen the movie since I was a kid, so it was essentially a first rewatch, that we both did a year ago. And we both came back this time trying to be like, let's give it a fair shake. Let's sit down. And the very first time we watched it, we watched the director's cut, and this time we decided to watch the theatrical cut because it was a little bit easier to follow according to what people said.
Which I do agree with that. So as my first time watching it, doing the director's cut, a big difference between the director's and the theatrical is that the director's cut doesn't have a lot of the voiceovers that Harrison Ford's character has that kinds of explains more pieces of the world. And while you can pick up on those things a little bit throughout the film, there are things that he explains in that voiceover that you never get an explanation of verbally or non-verbally throughout the entire movie. So watching the theatrical cut made me understand things a lot better.
So I think on this second watch, we ended up having slightly different opinions about the movie.
Really?
Yeah, because I felt like, and we were talking about this, that there were some parts of that movie that I felt like were redeemable.
I mean, I don't disagree.
But you disagree with something. So, like, one big thing that I took away that I thought was really good was actually the cinematography. I thought the shots were very interesting, and the usage of light was one of the best I've seen in a film. All those shots were so cool, and the light worked different ways. I thought it was cool.
So, I like the cinematography. I think I'm so spoiled with good CGI, guys. And while you can have good old sci-fi films with bad CGI that are still good sci-fi films, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't really like the wide shots of the city and like just different CGI elements in it. I don't know. I just didn't like it.
So you didn't really love, like, the design?
Maybe that's what it was. I didn't like the CGI design and like the city design and stuff like that. I liked it a little bit better when you're on like the street level, but I don't know. It felt very busy, I think is the best way I can explain it, which I guess is kind of the point. It's a very like compact city. It's very densely populated. I get that. I don't know. I just didn't like visually appeal to me.
Yeah, I thought that the world was pretty interesting, at least, and the concept was one that was very interesting to me. So as we watched it, I was interested in the world and what went on, and I thought it was cool looking.
So I think that the concept for this would have been great and mind-blowing if I had seen it when it first came out. But there are lots of iterations of this kind of storyline nowadays, honestly, like the whole clones and not knowing if you're a clone or not kind of thing. Like, that's been done in a lot of different ways. And while I recognize that this was one of the first, I guess, film versions of that, I get that. But from my own experience, I encountered that many, many times through my extensive watching and reading of sci-fi. So the storyline didn't appeal to me that much because to me it doesn't seem that original from my personal experience.
Which I do think in some ways, it's almost like if nowadays you went back and watched like a 90s TV show, it's awful because it just does all those tropes that TV shows have run into the ground now. But if you go back and watch the original, it just doesn't feel quite right, even though they were the first one to do it.
I also notoriously do not love slow burns. Like, they have to be done, like, just right. I'm really picky about them, and I did not like this slow burn. Like, I felt like this movie could have been, like, a 20-minute short. I don't know.
Which I agree. I felt like there was a lot of detail in there that just didn't make sense, which ultimately we sat there going, well, are we just dumb? And some of you out there might just be like, well, yes, you are.
That's okay.
But this movie puts stuff in there that it just doesn't always make sense. And it, like we said, if you watch our other movie reviews, a big thing for us is if things don't make sense in a movie, and there were several scenes that were just so confusing. Like,
it just pulls you out of it so much.
Like, I think one of the biggest offenders is the scene with Harrison Ford and what's her name who plays
Rachel.
Mm-hmm. In his apartment when she shows up, and like this sexy saxophone starts playing.
It's like the beginning of a bad porno, guys. I can't.
And he's like passed out on the couch drunk, and she's like starting to like play piano or whatever. Like, and you're just like, what's going on? She's like doing her hair. It's
That's
just
so
a weird scene.
I also didn't really enjoy the like villain of this story, which like he's kind of a villain, but only for like the second half. The Roy character, and they have the huge battle scene kind of at the end, and I just didn't like him. He came across as like a super crazy person, which crazy clone. I don't know. Like
I agree. For being a replicant, it felt like they didn't really define what his role was, because at one point he seems very focused on trying to extend his lifespan and on that thing. But then at the end, he almost takes a Joker-esque turn where he seems just kind of crazy and psycho.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was there for shock factor. Like a lot of the scenes before they get up onto like the roof or the street, wherever they were by the end of it, it just seems very like, hello, we're going to surprise you with this, even if it doesn't make sense. And I just didn't like it.
And what's interesting is he almost treats Harrison Ford's character like they have a pre-existing history. Like there's this long-standing feud between them. Except that's the first time they meet in the entire movie. Yeah. He meets his little other replicant buddies throughout the film and kills them, but they don't actually run into each other till the finale. And I found that odd, that it seems so personal when they could have had scenes where they were, meeting each other, protagonists and antagonists throughout the film, but that never happened.
One of the things I did really enjoy about this movie is the score. I think the music in this is beautiful, and it's very iconic, and it just, like, evokes that, like, ooh, sci-fi, like, feel goods. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, I will say there are a ton of details about, especially, like, just the overall atmosphere of this film that you can tell so many people have pulled from. Like, there's bits of Blade Runner in every sci-fi, so you do have to give it credit for having those details being pulled from that movie into all those different films.
I think my biggest thing with this is old sci-fis like this that are very, genre breaking, and they're very iconic, and the startup, like all these like 70s and 80s sci-fi films, a lot of our modern day sci-fi elements are pulled from that, and the other huge one is Star Wars. However, Star Wars is something that totally holds up to me, and I enjoy rewatching over and over again, even if it's not like the most spectacular movie. But this didn't translate the same as something like Star Wars does for me, and I think that's my biggest problem with it. It just, not necessarily that it has to hold up to modern day standards, especially on like level of CGI or something, but I just didn't translate as something that I was like, oh, I understand why that's iconic. Like, I get why bits and pieces of it are iconic, but the product as a whole, I just didn't really like or enjoy.
I think the difference is, let's take another older Ridley Scott film that in a lot of ways is very similar. Alien. It's sci-fi. It's a slow burn. Yeah, that very slow burn sci-fi, very atmospheric. There's not a whole ton of action throughout the movie. It's, and that movie is cohesive.
I love that movie.
The villain is fleshed out and scary. Like, the things that happen make sense. The acting is quality. And there were just different pieces of Blade Runner where that stuff didn't match. The storytelling didn't always feel cohesive. You didn't always understand why you were somewhere or what was going on, why the character is acting that way.
Especially without the voiceover bits that the director has.
And even if they were doing something that you understood, sometimes it didn't come across well because it felt very ham-fisted or acted.
And I do think that I agree with a lot of people who are critical of the theatrical cut versus the director's cut, because a lot of people don't like the theatrical cut because of the voiceovers. And as we were watching it, this really only has voiceovers for the first half, which is strange.
Yeah, they just stop.
It just randomly stops halfway through the movie. And while I liked having the voiceovers for my second watching of it because it made things a lot more cohesive and made sense for me, at the same time, they were incredibly cheesy, and I don't think they added to the atmosphere of the film at all, and the fact that they cut off halfway through is very strange. So they were like a double-edged sword for me.
Ultimately, this film feels like one that maybe we were just a little late to the party on. Maybe if we watched it 20 years ago, we'd be on board with people who really love this movie.
I don't know, I don't think 6-year-old me would have loved this movie.
Well, if we were older at the point in which it released, I think we might have been more on that train, but I think watching it now with so much quality sci-fi out there, it's just, you can respect it without necessarily having it be a holy grail for filmmaking, because there are a lot of things in this movie that, for us, struggled to make a quality film.
I think that's a good way to put it. I respect the impact that this has had on the genre and filmmaking going forward. However, the total product, I didn't enjoy.
It makes total sense to me why this movie originally bombed at the box office and then became a cult
I didn't
classic
know that.
later.
I can see that.
So I really understand why people really latched on this film and loved it, but I also understand why people did not like it. Because I think we end up falling more in that later category.
As always, let us know what you thought of this movie. If you completely loved it, great. We never want people to dislike movies, even if we did. But let us know your thoughts on it. Did you like it? Did you not? Are you excited for the new one? I've been a little wishy-washy for the new one just because I didn't like this first one. However, the trailers make it look great, so I hope it's good. We'll be seeing it in a few days.
Yep.
But if you like this video and like our movie reviews, please give us a thumbs up down below. It lets us know that these are the kind of videos that you want to see more of. And if you want to see more content from us, please subscribe. We have lots of different types of videos, including movie reviews, TV show reviews, comic books, you know, lots of fun stuff. So if you want to check out some of those videos, you can look right over there. And we will see you in our next video. Bye, guys.